Hello?
There we go. Well, I think you guys saw it. I mean, for us, once we, like I said at the beginning, we did our Paul Newman documentary. We learned about Willy's story and his plight and what he went through and all the difficulties. And the first thing we said is, well, why hasn't anyone made this documentary already? And we just knew that, this was a story that had to be told, and this was kind of our wheelhouse, is making stuff in the automotive space, and we met Willy, and we love Willy, so we just made it.
Testing. Testing. And so, Willy, when they approached you about putting together your life story, how did you feel? Was this something that you were looking to do, that you want more people to know your story?
I never approached my career that way. Mm-hmm. My focus was, I knew who I was, and as long as I knew that I could win, and did win, and I accomplished the goals that I put in front of me, that's what mattered most. The historians are always going to catch up to it eventually, right? And great. There's stories in people's lives that are documented. I think the timing of my career allowed that. But I didn't approach the auto racing for doing anything other than winning.
Obviously, the values that your grandfather gave you served you well. What were some other, where else did you get the grit and the determination and the confidence to pursue your career?
Henry was a very tough man. And he did not, there were three things he couldn't tolerate. He couldn't tolerate a thief, he couldn't tolerate a cheat or a liar. And I think if everyone adopted his method, there would be no need for lawyers. You make a commitment and you stand by it and you honor it. But there was a resolve, and he wasn't doting. He kept his foot in your ass, and he twisted it to make sure it didn't come out. So that was, and he just would not accept. You just didn't say to him, "I can't."
Now, did he live to see your success?
Yes.
Oh, that's
yeah.
great.
My dad was terrified of my grandfather. Actually, the whole family. He was just that. What he said went. And I bet my dad, once I started racing, my grandpa, he was paying attention. He didn't want to hear about it, but he was paying attention. And I bet my dad, it was 1985, I bet my dad, I said, hey, I'm going to invite Grandpa to the Sears Point to see me race. He said, don't waste your time. He's not going to go. I said, I'll bet you he goes. And so I called the ranch and I said, I'm going to be not far, because his ranch was about 70 miles from Sonoma. And he says, okay. He says, I'll have Ronnie take me. And he came to the race, and I won. And after the race, I came from the press room, and I got changed. And people were talking and celebrating. And so I walked up to him and I shook his hand, and he said to me, what could you have done better? And I said, well, I could have done this. And then he asked me, he says, how much money did you make? I said, I made $20,000. He said, for 1 hour? And I said, yes, sir. And he says, you keep racing. And I looked at my dad's face. I just looked at my dad like that, right? And that was it. but with him, and then of course Muhammad Ali. I mean, all the and Newman, and despite Bill's setback and what happened and what he did, what I learned from all the people that came into my life, it was all, and it kept reinforcing that what I was doing was right. I was on the right path, because people come into your life and they just keep moving you along. And that gave me a lot of confidence. And I'm going to tell you what, there was a lot of things that I provoked in that sport. I was never going to be reactive. I was going to be proactive. Okay, and so and there's one guy in here sitting at the front who's a journalist that watched me create that. I did it because I knew I had to. And I was not going to be perceived as a victim or be perceived as weak. All right? And that was, and that sort of came from both my and Henry, Ali and Henry. They just said, hey, this is what you're going to have to do. And that was my model.
Now, your career has served as a door opener for another generation of black racers. I mean, what do you think when you see the field populated with so many other, black riders? I mean, drivers. Obviously, most notably, Lewis Hamilton out of Great Britain, but there are other black drivers who, are now more commonplace on the scene. How does that make you feel that your career sort of inspired a generation?
Well, I think that, there's still, I mean, if you look at all the females that are driving racing cars and Indy cars, we're still way behind. And, of course, Lewis Hamilton, remember, Lewis Hamilton came from a country that I started my career. And when I was there, I was a race driver. And they liked me because I could go fast and I could win. When I came home, it was a different story. And until, the sponsors of this sport, African Americans put $1 trillion into this country with their money, and namely the automobile industry. Well, the automobile industry has never been kind. They've never said, you know what you've done, we think is really important, and we want it to continue. And until that happens, until that is almost a mandate from our people, from the people in this room, from this country, that we want to see you do something to continue the investment as sport. And the sport has suffered. Auto racing is not a big deal in America, not like the NFL, not like the NBA. Auto racing is second tier. Now, Formula One, that's a worldwide sport. That's a whole different can of worms. But until this sport and the principles of IndyCar, the principles of IndyCar and NASCAR, until they make that happen, they are going to continue to have low numbers. Golf has big numbers for a reason, right? They got it right away as soon as they saw the numbers. Until the other sanctioning bodies and the principles of the sanctioning bodies, until they get it together, they're going to suffer low numbers.
Now let's talk more about the process of making the film. Now, my understanding is that it took a number of years for you from start to finish. Why? Was it just identifying people who could help frame the story? What was involved in putting together the piece?
Willy talks a lot. That's what took most of the time. No. We did the Paul Newman documentary. We knew Willy's story was awesome. We started there. We ended up going over to England and interviewing Bernie Ecclestone. We also make sure, I mean, the one thing Willie didn't say earlier is like, when, it took a little bit for him to trust us to tell his story. He didn't. I remember the first time we showed it to him. He was very on the edge of like, is this going to be good or am I going to be really mad? And I knew when he was done watching it that we did well. But the process for us, it takes us at least a year and a half to make a doc because we just make sure that it's, we want it to be perfect, and you always find new footage and new people and new parts of the story, and, you got to track down, Bernie Ecclestone was a hard interview to get. Caitlyn Jenner took a little while to get. Certain parts of it aren't as easy as the race car drivers, and we wanted all of it to tell the story because it's not quite a complete story if you don't have Caitlyn Jenner in there and that part of the story. So you just want to make sure you get the whole thing, and we wanted to make sure that we got his story right also because it's a really important story, and we didn't Adam and I have a saying of when we have a good story of like it's ours to F up. That's what we say, because we knew his story was so good, and we knew it was powerful, and we knew that it, when he raced, now, there's a few black drivers in each series. When he raced, he's the only one. There was no one else in any other series at all. He was the only one. And he kind of blows it off a little bit of like all that he had to deal with, but he dealt with it constantly because, all the mechanics, everybody, there's there aren't any other African Americans there. It's just him and, his brother and a few other people, but that's it. And so he, did you tell him the story about the bathroom wall? Did you tell that? Is that in the doc? Oh, it is. Okay. He has a lot of stories like that where it's like he laughs it off, but to me it's traumatizing. Where I'm like, why would people do that? But it's a testament to who he is that he just kept going, and he just kept going, and he wanted to win, and that he was so good. I mean, my favorite line in the whole documentary is when he goes, "If you want me out of your sport, then beat me," because they just couldn't beat him. So that was. And there was a lot of them that did want him not to be there, and we want to tell that whole story and the corporate part of this. We went back and forth a little bit about when Coca-Cola said we don't want to be in racing. Well, they had their own race. They have the Coca-Cola 600. Bill Cosby at that time was their main. I mean, that was when he was massive and. Paul, Adam, my partner, has a bunch of Paul Newman race cars, and most of them say Diet, because Paul Newman always drank Diet Coke. They say Diet Coke on the hood. They sponsored Paul Newman, but they would not sponsor Willy. So we wanted to say, Kodak, they had their own car. They sponsored Bill Cosby. Jell-O Pudding, they sponsored it. And these are the biggest, these are the people who are, Bill Cosby thought, oh, well, we're just going to go get Willy $10 million and get a race team, but they just wouldn't do it. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that corporate America wouldn't, Willy had to go into races where other teams had $6 million worth of a car and he had 500,000 because he couldn't get the sponsorships.
Why was there such a resistance from corporate America, given, to your point earlier, the overall enormous profitability of, blacks being in professional sports? Was it because of the perception that race car driving is something for rednecks?
Well, their fear, and were they worried about some backlash, or were they worried about? Their out was, well, blacks don't follow auto racing, so right. And that was, well, blacks didn't follow golf either.
Or tennis.
Right. Or tennis, right. So they had their soundbite. And speaking of Coca-Cola, I was here, I got a call from Bill one day. This was 1992. He says, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm home right at the moment. I want you to be in Atlanta at sunup tomorrow. Call Mrs. Keelhan and she'll have your ticket. This is, we're going to see the president of Coke. So I flew in, he flew in on his jet, and we met here. And we went to Coke here in Atlanta, and we went up to the 20th floor, and we met with the president and president's note takers, and he says, well, how much do you need, Mr. Cosby? Well, to do this right, to compete against the big guys, we need $7 million. And for $7 million, not only you get the team, but you get me unlimited, unlimited. Commercial spots, unlimited, whatever. And they said, oh, well, no, that scares us, that kind of money. That was his words, quote. And so he said, but we can do $500,000. Wow. Okay? And then he said, Bill, we have something we'd like you to see. And what's that? We just did a commercial. We'd like you to look at it. So, okay. So they turned on a commercial full of polar bears sliding down a mountain drinking Coke. Well, that was the first time they showed. Remember that polar bear commercial? Well, these polar bears were going down, and it was a 3-minute commercial, and they switched it off, and they looked at Bill. Well, what do you think? They were all like squirrels. Bill said, polar bears don't drink Coke. And the guy, our marketing guy, he just dropped his head, and he says, squirrels don't drink Coke, beavers don't drink Coke. And that was it, and meeting over. Okay, well, let's get out of here. So we're going down the elevator, and Bill looks at me and Sam and says, I don't care if this damn elevator's bugged. Call Pepsi when we get to the first floor.
Wow, wow. So where are you at now? The finished product. What's your next step?
Yeah, now we did have, or we have a very substantial writer who watched this and wanted to make it into a TV series, so that's possible. But we're kind of putting everything together to start distributing this in September or October of this year and get it out there in the world. So everybody go home and write about it on social media.
What do you want the takeaway to be after people have watched the movie?
I want people to know, I really want people to know and understand what Willy went through and what he, what he had to go through to get to the finish line and to get through what he did, and that, even for me, when I put all this together, it's hard to digest that this is still out there and happening. It's kind of unfathomable to me, where I'm like, this is my lifetime. I was alive and Finder in the 80s, and it's just, to me, I go, how can we just make sure this is done now, or get it as done, and as many, so that racing has a substantial barrier to entry. That's just doesn't matter what your background is, because it's expensive to get into racing. That's just the truth of racing. But I do want as many, if there's I want there to be programs and things for kids, like Willy, who, Lewis Hamilton's a very special person who was found by a very rich guy and put through racing. And Willy didn't have that. He had to use his college money to go racing. And I just want there to be a place where if you have an aptitude for racing, and you're a young African-American kid, a young Hispanic kid, a young whatever, you can go and someone will give you a chance. That's what really all you need is a chance. And then it's up to you, but at least get a chance.
Well, the sport needs it. Let's face it, the sport needs it. As my grandpa used to say on the ranch, you're sucking hind tit. Right? Okay, and the next thing to that hind tit is the ass. Okay. So that's where they're at right now. And
Hey, so, I mean, how do you spend your time today? Do you lecture? Do you
no,
travel clinics?
well, with the film, I've been traveling around. My son, Theo Ribbs, is one of the top shotgun shooters in the world. And in fact, a week from tomorrow, we'll be flying to London, England, because he's shooting the World Championship in London. And I really thought when my career was over, I was going to just be out on the ranch, right, and drive around in a tractor. But once, you know, he started shooting when he was 12, and then he became junior national champion. Then he became national K-Cup champion 2 years ago. And I'm going to Italy with him. Jonathan knows there, and a lot of people follow Theo, and you know, he's in Dubai, and he's in London, and he's in France and Italy, and so I started traveling with him because he was too young to rent a car, right? So so that's, you know, he's got a career, and my grandfather said to us, you're going to have, if you don't know what career you're going to have, we're going to find you one. And so I never had to, I was lucky. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do, and he started out the same way in his career, shooting a shotgun, and he's good at it.
Now, fortunately, he's not experiencing the same type of obstacles that you had to, certainly not race.
Let me tell you, shooting is a redneck sport. Okay? However, they like him.
Okay.
It's funny when everyone's carrying a gun, how much respect you have for each other. I've never heard the N-word once.
That's good. We're going to open up for questions, but before we do, I want to give a shout out to the executive producers, Nick May, who is manager of the African American Film Critics Association, and my organization, and also to Van Lathan.
Yep.
But for those people who who's a radio personality, most of you know best from TMZ. For people who want to follow you and see where the movie's playing, where you guys are going to be next.
You can go to chassis.com, CHASSY.com. That's where you can pre-order the Blu-ray or the DVD if you want it. And it's our website. We make a lot of car stuff, you know, a lot of automotive content.
And then social media? Your social media?
Social
handles?
media for me is @NateAdams26.
And
Instagram.
Social media for me is just Facebook.
You're on Twitter too.
Am I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am on Twitter. Believe me, I'm social media inept or challenged. You know, Theo had to show me how to do all that, and I just started doing it. My business partner back, Chris Miles, he handles Twitter, and he'll create something and say, "How do you like this?" And you know.
Chris, what's the handle?
Willy Ribs.
Okay, @Willy Ribs on Twitter and on Facebook. Just Willy Ribs.
Yeah, Willy T. Ribs.
Willy T. Ribs
on Facebook.
So definitely follow. But those of you who have questions, come up to the mic, and I'm sure the guys will be happy to answer.
Okay, I'm Jonathan Ingram. I work for RacingToday.com, a longtime motor racing journalist. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on an excellent documentary. Did a really good job of telling Willy's story within the context of motor racing. So that's, I'll go to the back of the line for my second question, but you know, Indy is a very unique place, Willy, and you had the circumstances where you sort of had the budget and you didn't have the right team, and then you had the right team, Tim Waldrop and Derek Walker, the second time around. And again, it's a very unique atmosphere and procedure at the month of May at Indy. If you'd had the right guys and the right budget, and you were competing at the front of the field to win and to beat people, do you think the response would have been different? What what would you have anticipated under those circumstances at Indy? And I'm not trying to call out NASCAR or call out Indy. I'm just, what do you think after your long experience at Indy?
Well, for example, for me to get a call from Roger Penske and race for Penske, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different level. Everything is bigger and better, just in terms of knowledge and their technical prowess and their resources. No matter what, I mean, Lewis Hamilton is the greatest race driver on the planet right now, and he's 5-time world champion. But the Germans, i.e. Mercedes, is giving him the best of everything, and that's what it takes. The Germans have no problem with what you look like. All they care is that you win. That's all they matter, and that's why they win. And if maybe the political pressure would have been too much for Roger. If Roger wanted to do it, I would have been in his team, and we would have been successful, without a doubt. Because you're limited to what you've got. You're not going to win the Kentucky Derby on a Shetland pony. You might be in the Derby, but that quarter horse is not going to cut it.
So you think the fan reaction would be just as warm and welcoming at Indy if you're running at the front as it would be making the field?
You bet, without doubt. Maybe even bigger.
Willie, how did you learn to reconcile, to heal from knowing that if only I had received more support, if only this country, some institutions in this country could get over themselves, that I could have advanced, I could have realized my fullest potential?
Well, I wasn't going to let them make me an alcoholic. That's for damn sure. I mean, it wouldn't have been, Henry wouldn't have tolerated it, right? And he's upstairs. Mm-hmm. And, he wouldn't have tolerated, he just didn't tolerate weakness. And he wasn't the type of person that went and complained and tried to cost somebody their job or make a big thing out of it. He kicked your ass right on the spot. Mm-hmm. And you were going to eat out of a straw for 2 weeks. That's how he raised us. You dealt with it, and then you sat down with them and asked them why they did what they did.
Sir, next question.
Hi. First, to Nate and team, kudos to you for telling a bona fide leader in his universe, unapologetic, strong, get it done kind of guy, and doing honor to his story. So mine isn't so much a question to you, but an offer if you'd like some help in getting it into Full Frame Film Festival, which is a documentary film festival up at Duke, or at getting it in. I'd like to walk it into the Smithsonian for you. The woman.
Sure, love to.
So I'd like to talk about that. But it really is a fine piece of work. Willy Ribs, you're uppity, fine, smart, focused self. Just thank you for being you, and welcome to Atlanta. And if you're so engaged, if you're not so engaged, I'd love to take you to breakfast tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. But we're definitely walking to that Smithsonian together.
First of all, I'd like to thank both of you for sharing this story. It was very inspirational. I had not heard of your story before. I actually was told of this story personally by Van Lathan, and as I was talking and texting him back and forth in the back watching it, he wanted me to give you a call. So he's on the phone right now. He just wanted to say a couple of words. You there?
Yo, can Willie hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Van.
Hello? The only question I have right now is, does this screening look as lit as the screening that we had in LA? Is Atlanta holding it down?
Looks good, man. It looks really good.
Can you hear?
What is that?
He said it looks good, man. We all in here.
All right. Well, listen, I want to say one thing really quickly. I hope that everyone was as enthralled and sort of as rewarded by Willie's story as what I was. I know that you guys have the man sitting right here. Well, I'm not going to keep up too much of your time. But the story to me is an important one because it shows that a black man in America, the hurdles that he has to jump, the lines that he has to cross, the barriers that he has to break down, to do whatever it is that he wants to do, the common threads remain the same. And Willy sitting up there, you guys are looking at him, you're looking at somebody who endured all of those things, who went through all of those things just to live out his dream. And I'm incredibly proud to be part of a project and part of giving recognition to a man who did so much, went through so much because he looked like me. So everyone give a round of applause to Willy T. Williams. I'm in Anguilla right now, so I'm drunk. But I am going to make it my mission through this film and through everything else I can do to make sure that this brother gets his flowers while he's still here to smell them. So Willy, I appreciate you. Love the movie. Appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it, man. And God bless you, dog.
Are you, I hear bubbles. Are you in the jacuzzi?
Can you hear him?
What did he say?
He said he hears bubbles. Are you in the jacuzzi right now, Van?
Nah, understand something, Willy. The jacuzzi is for broke niggas. I'm in that lane. Okay? And so I'm not in the jacuzzi. I'm in the ocean right now. Water up to my
Big
neck.
boy talk.
I'm looking down. Yeah, I'm looking down. I see Nemo right here. That's where I'm chilling with. I just wanted to take time out to go ahead and say, in all sincerity, man, live it up, smell your flowers. You deserve it. You earned it, my brother.
Thanks, Van.
I don't want to take up too much time. Just the question I actually have for you was, in contrast to other people that they would compare you to, Jackie Robinson and things of that nature, other athletes that have that participate in sports where it's kind of a one-on-one type of thing, you have to rely on a group of people in order to get your goal accomplished. And with all that you dealt with racism-wise, how the hell did you trust white people to help you out in your continued service and in your continued path to get to where you wanted to go after you dealt with everything you dealt with?
Because not all white people, I mean, Paul Newman's white. Right. All right. Tim Wardrop, I mean, you can't, I never painted anybody with a broad brush. Either you're good or you're bad. And that's how I dealt with it. And, you know, I dealt with a lot of, you know, through experience, you learn, you know, you can pretty much read the body language and you try to listen to everything. And, you know, you've got to trust somebody. And the people that I trusted, some didn't smell right, and others did. Others were there. And if it wasn't for Truman, and if it wasn't for Paul, I mean, nothing would have happened.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Dwight Tony. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. I wanted to say, Mr. Ribbs, that was excellent. I love that documentary. I think my main question is how did you get your parents to give you your tuition money to go overseas? I'm just trying to understand.
How? Because they knew I wasn't going to college. I mean, I had told my mom, I'm not going to college. Send Alman, Vic.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Well,
back then, yeah.
Mom knew what, you know, my dad, you know, he was on the fence, you know, is he going to go over there and just chase English girls, or is he going to go race? And, you know, and Mom told my dad, this is what we're going to do, and he's, you know, let him do it. And so I was on an airplane heading to England.
If you don't mind, can you give us an amount of money that you had?
At that time?
Yes.
They budgeted me $10,000 in my first year, and in 1977.
And that didn't get him through the whole season. He won the season with like 3-4 races left to go, and he ran out of money.
Right.
But he already won. Like, no one could catch him.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That wasn't just racing money. That was total for everything. In fact, the guy that lived down the street from me, he owned a fish and chip shop. He was from Turkey. And I took him to my second race, and I won the race. And on the way home, he says, "You get fish and chips forever." I never ate so many fish and chips. I mean, cod and chips was nearly every night. Right.
And then he also started, they had like a Friday night boxing thing at the pub for money, and he would box and make extra money.
Yeah, they had Friday nights, and I was whipping up on drunks. I didn't drink. I didn't drink, and I found out. I went to a pub by accident, and me and the buddy, and I saw these guys roping off this area, and they drink and they bet money on who would win. And I thought, well, okay, let me try this. Well, I won, and I made about 100 pounds in bet money, and 100 pounds was pretty damn good money. And so I came back for three straight times, and then they called it off because they thought it was the Americans coming over here and taking our money, and pretty soon they quit.
By the way, he told me all this after I already finished the whole documentary. So I was like, why the hell would you not tell me this before so I could put it in the documentary?
Hey, I appreciate that, man.
Thank you for being here.
First off, I just want to say a great piece. Nate, excellent work. Mr. Ribs, I've talked to you a little bit before. I told you how you've been an inspiration to me really my entire life. I grew up about 50 miles away from where you did. And I started driving when I was 12, just like you did, up in the hills. And so the similarities are very remarkable, all the way down to me coming up to my parents with a proposal for my college money. But that's where it stopped. Yeah, my dad was like, "You're going to Morehouse," and that's it. So I came down here, and I went to Morehouse, and I started racking up a bunch of traffic tickets, and I figured out that I needed to do my driving in a sanctioned organization, and that's what really led me into racing. And I did pretty well, and I was everything was going well, but I ran out of money. And I'm sure this is a story that you've heard plenty of times, but I never lost my love for the sport. And I still work in this arena. I'm a driver now at Porsche, and my question for you is, for those of us who tried and didn't make it, what can we do to still help the effort? Because we're still putting in the work. The reason I work down there is because my goal is to change the narrative, is to let people know that we are enthusiasts, that we have the skill, that we have the aptitude, that we have the full understanding of vehicle dynamics, of the way that the sport operates. But what can we do on a grand scale to
Well,
illustrate
it's a
that
great
to
question because Chris Miles and I, we have decided that the next career path for Willy T. Ribs is Willy T. Ribs Racing. All right? And we expect that the manufacturers and the corporate sponsors of the sport will join us. I paid my dues, and they know it, all right? So they're not getting involved with an unknown. I know the sport very well, and putting the right people together. And in your case, and the reason I segued off your statement is getting a group of the best guys, the smart people that want to be involved, that have absolute airtight commitment. You can't waver on it. This is our goal, and this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to get the financing, because it's all money, no matter what it is. You've got to have money to build this building, or you have to have money to build a racing team, or a racing effort, or a group. That is how I'm going to approach it, and I would think that would be the best way to approach it. And Bernie Ecclestone, I'm going to tell you what. Bernie Ecclestone is the smartest guy that auto racing has ever seen. Bernie's that big, but when he walks in the room, he's the giant. And Adam Carolla bet me that Bernie wouldn't do it. he said, I said, because do you think Bernie Ecclestone would do it? I said, of course he would. Oh, no, he won't. I said, you want to bet on that? He says, yeah, I'll take that bet. I emailed Bernie, and in the email I said, Bernie, I said, you know, you did something. Your legacy is very important, Mr. Ecclestone. How many people know that you put the first black man in a Formula One car? I said, I know you would like to know, let the world know that. And your legacy is, oh, I went right to Bernie's, oh yeah. I didn't grab him down here, I grabbed him up here. And I got an email back the next day saying, when do you want to do it? And he said, done deal, June 17th. I sent that email to Adam and Nate, and they were like, holy shit. Bernie Ecclestone, because Bernie doesn't do that. And so it's just a matter of positioning yourself with the right people. You've got to get to the right people. And LeBron James, Michael Jordan, if they wanted to run an IndyCar team, they could do it tomorrow. Right? They could do it tomorrow. This is our budget. Bill Cosby didn't care about auto racing. He wanted me to succeed. In fact, don't ask me to go to a race. I get a headache. And so, but he wanted to see success. And if it can be done, Ron Dennis showed that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kamari Odom. I'm an up-and-coming driver, and my passion is racing as well. So, Willie, I wanted to ask you personally, I know we've talked a couple, if you ever did get that chance to actually race in Formula One, how many championships do you think you would have won?
That I can't answer because it's so much, whether it's winning Indy 500. You know, Michael Andretti never won the Indy 500. Yeah. And Michael was with the best team since he was born. And Al Unser Jr., he won it twice. However, luck has a lot to do with where you go and who you're with and what technical prowess you have over, for example, Lewis is in Mercedes. Well, the Germans are always going to out-horsepower you. They don't say anything. They just keep behind the scenes. They never close the door. The lights never go off. Well, you've got to be with the right team. So I couldn't tell you. I couldn't, even if Bernie would have been able to bring me onto his team, I don't know if I would have ever won a championship. You just don't know because everyone's always ratcheting up their technology and who's got the best engine program, who's got the best chassis engine, and there's so many components to being competitive in racing. You've got to have the power, you've got to have the R&D, you've got to have the chassis strength and when I say chassis strength, you've got to have a car that's mechanically better than the next, and then you have to have power on top of it better than the next to stay out front.
And I'd also like to say thank you guys so much for doing this because I'm a huge fan of Willy. I'm not that old, but I've heard a lot of stories about him and his success. And really, I really think that this should get all over the world as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, how old are you, young man?
I'm 20 years old.
Okay, all right, well, you're...
Tell your friends about Willy.
Well, no, I'm going to tell people about you because now it's your turn, young man.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Odom, I know who you are because that name, do I recognize that hat?
Yes, sir.
What
You
name's on
signed
that hat? Is that my name on that hat?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, well, yeah, just we're working on making it a opportunity for you.
Yes, sir.
Chris Miles and I and the group that we're with, and so you're a young kid, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't get into any trouble with anybody. Just stay focused, and you never know where you're going to end up.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janice Fletcher, and I am from Indianapolis, Indiana. Born and raised there. I was there in the audience when you won, or when you qualified. Of course, we were working in concessions, my son and I. But it's just an honor to see you physically. We weren't able to see you that day because we were so far away. But anyway, I appreciate the story, and I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of you and my son as well. We're all proud of you, and we're proud that you were there in our city, and just good to see you in person. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, and I'd like to add that everyone here, I'm just as proud of you to want to know what happened and to share the story. This is compliments to you all.
So I wanted to follow up on the Ecclestone episode when you went to Estoril, and obviously you had the talent and skill and experience to drive a Formula One car. And then it ran into one of those typical of racing arbitrary obstacles. I'd just like to know a little bit more about how you handled that disappointment, because that's really an incredible accomplishment to get as far as you did, and then the dream is there, and then one phone call and it's not. How did you handle that?
Bernie told me it was a long shot. Him and Herbie Blash, they said, Willie, he said, it's a long, Formula One is very nationalistic. The French love their French drivers, and Italians love their drivers, and even though Ferraris had, different drivers, from whether it's Mansell or, even Mario did a little bit. Mario is from Italy, so it was a 50-50 chance that Bernie would been able to sign me, because two drivers he had were Italian, with Olivetti, which was which would bankroll the deal, and so I mean I knew he wanted to, but I wasn't that disappointed, because I knew where his heart was, and believe me, not very many American drivers in history, have driven a Formula One car. Not very many, period.
So it was the other way around. It's like you got your chance and you proved yourself. So that.
And that was the objective. And Bernie, Bernie Ecclestone had a bet with another person about how fast I would go in Estoril, and I believe the other person was Jackie Stewart, who and we were not in love with each other at all. Okay, Jackie Stewart has been a vicious critic of Lewis Hamilton to this very day, and to the point where he called Lewis a boy. This was 2 months ago. So I think it was Jackie Stewart, and I think Bernie just wanted to prove a point.
Good story. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Anita Green. Thank you for a great film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't know anything about car racing other than GTOs and 442s back in the day. But I want to know, how did you come up with the title Uppity? And I'm sure you like the title. I kind of like it, but it seems kind of fitting. But I'm just curious as to how you guys came up with that title.
You want to hear the real story?
Yeah, well.
Do you want to start? You started off, Nate.
Well, we were in my office in Los Angeles, and Adam Carolla, who's my partner, and Willie and I, and we, Adam asked Willie, what should we call this thing? And I'd had a brief conversation with Willie about this before, and then Willie said, well, there's only one thing we can call this.
Well, and it was 11 o'clock. I want to set the stage. It was 11 p.m., and we had just started filming, and, it was just an offhanded sort of, what are we going to call this thing, right? And Nate and Adam looked at me, and I paused, and I said, well, there's only one, uppity nigger. And Carolla they both looked at each other like this, and Carolla just dropped his head. And he said, we can't do that. He says, Sharpton will be out here marching the next day. I thought it was so funny. I had tears rolling down. It was so funny because Carolla's a comedian, and so I said, But, all right, we can leave everything else off, but Uppity was the tag,
Okay.
and that's it. That says it all.
I'm sure
That's
people
it.
called you uppity back then.
Oh,
I
I
know they
was
did.
I was lucky to get Uppity.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Willy T, how's it going again?
All right, how are
All
you?
right, I just want to know, I know you have a great relationship with Muhammad Ali, and how much of that relationship gets tighter? Like, you never asked for money or any celebrity towards the race?
Never.
And,
I never asked. When Paul called me, I didn't ask that phone call. When Bill called, I didn't ask. He asked me, "What's it going to take?" And in Ali's case, Ali was every day was giving to people every day. I mean, I'd gotten his Rolls Royce with him one day. He says, "Come on, I gotta go send some money." And so we got in his car and we went to Western Union to help some guy out that needed $200. He took it on himself to do it. And I thought, you know what, every day, you know, if people can't see it, and this is where I have a problem with the sponsors of the sport and auto racing, you can see what needs to be done. Okay, you can see it, you know what needs to be done. You shouldn't have to ask, okay? You shouldn't have to be asked. You should say, all right, this is what we want to do. This is where we need to go with this. So I never ask.
and one more question, George Mack, he actually raced the Indy 500 after he did.
Yes.
Did he ever reach out to you for any advice or questions or anything?
No,
He did?
no.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hi, how are you all? Great documentary, great story, fantastic. I just had a quick racing question.
Is that moonshine in there or water?
It's an Atlanta specialty, so
Okay.
I got another jug for you if you want it after. No, I'm kidding. Just a quick racing question for you. What did you have a favorite track when you were racing? And if so, what was it and why?
You know, funny, a lot I get asked the question, what was your favorite car?
Okay.
And the answer has always been the one I won in. I never had a favorite car. The tracks, I sort of broke them up in the type of tracks. They were big ovals, like Indy, super speedways. I like Michigan. Michigan was my favorite. Short oval was Loudon, New Hampshire. Road course was Monterey, Laguna Seca, or Sears Point. And street courses were Australia and Long Beach.
Awesome, thank you.
Awesome film. So, as a driver, with everything that you had to go through, you know, it's hot, you're getting in the car, you've got all this pressure. How did you go from taking all of this input, negative as it was, and just focus?
Because you'll crash if you don't. I mean, it was pretty easy. I mean, you don't have to tell yourself to focus once you put that thing in gear and go. You know, you switch on, right? You switch on, and that switch, you know, you're going so damn fast that you don't think about anything other than doing what you need to do at that moment. And you know, all the negative stuff, yeah, that never crossed my mind while I was driving. As far as the hot cockpit you mentioned, look, I used to,
You say that
when
again
I
really
was
fast.
racing, a lot of the drivers wore cool suits, right? They runs cool stuff through their driver's suit and their helmet. Well, I didn't wear that. As a matter of fact, I didn't even wear underwear underneath except for boxers. And I'd walk around and my suit would be half open, and a couple of drivers say, "Man, don't you wear Nomex underwear?" I said, "No." I said, "You guys wear cool suits, right?" They said, "Yeah, we wear cool suits." I said, "Well, you know, I don't wear underwear because I got to stay cool, and you know, I like to feel that sweat run down my face." And I did all that just, you know, and it was all a method. It was all, you know, but you know, I never let that bother me. That temperature and other stuff.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Now, how did you keep from feeling claustrophobic?
Let me tell you what, you're just going so damn fast. When you get in that car, it might feel a little bit tight in the beginning, but once you start, you see everything. Yeah, you do not feel claustrophobic at all. And when that after the race is over, you're going to lose 5 to 6 pounds. In fact, you might be a little loose in the car afterwards. And so you don't really feel that. You don't pay attention to it. You might when you initially get in, but once you start, you're in it.
Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Rose Edinburgh, and my neighbor, stand up, her name is Rose.
Hi, Rose.
Her voice is challenged, so she asked me if I would ask you a question. So here I am.
Please.
She wants to know, how did your family take to all that, the danger of being in the races?
Well, my dad, you know, when I was born, my dad was racing motorcycles. And then he went from motorcycles to cars. And my mother and dad, you know, they had friends. And, you know, my dad lost some friends of his who were race drivers. They knew the dangers. But I think that they had a certain amount of confidence in my ability to control a car. I mean, there's some things that are out of your hands. Mechanical failure, it's out of your hands. If you have mechanical failure, you're going to crash no matter what. But for the most part, there's a saying in auto racing that a race driver named Phil Hill had, and they asked him, well, why didn't you ever get hurt? He says, because I never crashed in a place where I could, right? So, you know, they knew the dangers and they accepted it, and they knew that regardless, live or die, I was going to do what I was going to do.
I forgot to tell you that I'm from Terre Haute, Indiana. Never been to Indianapolis 500. Always, you know, watching my uncles and everybody get excited about it. Still haven't been. And I'd like to thank Nate. You have done an outstanding job of preserving history. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming.
Good afternoon, Tony Reynolds. When I was about, in the early 80s, I started getting Auto Week magazine. And just imagine my surprise when I opened up Auto Week magazine and saw your picture, because I had never seen that before in all my years of reading automobile magazine. So I've been a fan of yours since then, and this is just truly one of the best things I've ever seen, because now I get to see the true story of really what happened. I've seen in the past what journalists have let me see, or what they put out there. But I want to thank you, Nate, and you, Willy, and Adam Carolla for doing this, because now I truly understand the true story. But my question is this: is there anybody that you wanted for this that you could not get, or any story or part of this story besides the boxing story in England that you did not were not able to put into this?
There's I mean, Bob Lobenberg, the guy that he hit in the head, that guy was going to be in it, but then he decided he didn't want to do it. There was Scott Pruitt, the guy that knocked him out of the race. He was going to do it, then he decided he didn't want to do it magically. For the longest time, Caitlyn Jenner was very hard to track down, and then Adam basically, like Willy got 100% Bernie Ecclestone, like we couldn't have got him without Willy. And I don't think we would have got Caitlyn Jenner without Adam. Adam just happened to run into Caitlyn Jenner and be like, you got to do this. And then that happened. But otherwise, everybody was really good about it.
I'm Dennis Tone, and being a few years older than Willie, I followed your career during those times, and was always impressed with your driving. You had mentioned females, and I had just seen a documentary on Janet Guthrie. Many parallels along the way. I was wondering if you'd ever had a chance to talk with her during those times about some of the things that she saw, and had an opportunity to try to overcome, maybe offer some advice to you.
Janet is the first, and I'm at first, the biggest race on the planet. And Janet and I'm a fan of Janet's, and Janet is a fan of mine. And I told her, last time I saw her was a year or two ago at Indy. In fact, Chris Miles was with me. It was at McCormick at Smith Restaurant. And Chris says, you need to give Janet a hug for a photo. I said, well, Janet, you're going to get more than a hug. She says, oh, Willie. So I kissed her on the lips, and I said, you're lucky, you're not 20 years younger, honey. And she says, you're such a flirt. But no, Janet has been we didn't talk a lot because Janet stays to herself. But she was when we talked, she was very supportive. And I knew what she went through. I was told what she went through. And I love her to death.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out again.
We're working on that right now. We're working on putting a movie together.
On July 10th, we will be hosting Master P and Romeo for I've Got the Hookup, which will be the second installment of the AFCA Summer Screening Series. So we hope to see you at that event. But let's give another round of applause to Willy and Tanae.